That different factions of the public need to consider to better understand the dialogue about wolf recovery. First Ed, then Larry, then Mike.
I do take immense pleasure in Mike being to my far left. I guess in terms of what the public needs to know or not, I'm probably one of the worst people to ask that. One, I'm really hard of hearing, so I don't know what people are telling me all the time. I think part of it is we all need a little bit of patience, and I think what's happening in our political system in the country, where the two sides don't really get a chance to hear each other that much. We can choose our own radio show or TV program, get the news we want. I think that's a disservice to other people. I think that it would behoove everybody to listen to each other a little bit more. Okay, we all know from what's going on in Congress right now that has no chance of happening at all. So I think the three things I would think would be patience. People started talking about putting wolves in Yellowstone Park in the 60s. It took 30 or 40 years for that to happen, and a lot of effort and persistence to have that happen. So you need to have a patience, you need to have persistence, and then I think you need to listen to the other side a little bit more from both sides, and realize that ranchers and hunters have legitimate concerns about wolf restoration. People that like to view wolves or see wolves in the wild or just know that they're there have a legitimate concern about how their perception of what wildlife in North America should be heard about that. And so the three things would be stick with it and don't be afraid to fight for your values. That's kind of the American way. There's nothing wrong with fighting hard for what you believe in and struggling for that. But it's also kind of useless to just get pissed and take your ball and go home, as we've just seen with the recent Congress. So persistence, understanding, and then just a little bit of patience.
Larry.
Yeah, I think I'll make the first two real short, and I'm going to spend my time on the third point. First point is, I'd like for people to understand that soundbite and immediate satisfaction in conservation work is a naive undertaking at best. In conservation work, you better be in it for the long haul. After less than 20 years of Mexican wolf recovery effort, people claim it's a failure. We've got 75 wild wolves on the ground, where less than 2 decades ago we had 0. These are wild-born wolves. Over 90% of that population is wild-born wolves. That's a huge turning point in any repatriation and recovery effort. And to call that a failure is, well, when people announce it's a failure, I look at the individual and I think they're either having an agenda or they're incredibly naive and unsophisticated in conservation work. Number 2, active management is essential to any repatriation effort, and we have to be able to engage in a broad array of active management. Number 3, and I think far more important than the other two, is to understand the vitriolic nature of the conversation about conservation in the world today. When I looked at the title for this symposium, I thought about it shouldn't be wolves and man at the crossroads, as if the agencies are in the intersection to be collided between the two. I don't think wolves and man are at a crossroads. I think we're doing well with wolves. We're figuring out how to get there. It's not where we want it, but we're on the way. Conservation is at the crossroads. Conservation is definitely at the crossroads. You look at the House proposed budget that comes out that slashes state wildlife grants, that devastates all the conservation portions of the Farm Bill, that cuts or guts the funding for all of our conservation national organizations, and you realize that we have to change this vitriolic discussion. Even the fact that we choose to debate as if there's going to be a winner that has the right answer to wolf conservation. We need to reframe our dialogue, reframe our discussion about how we bring people together to create a 21st century of conservation that has all the systematic structures it takes to be successful 100 years out, not just getting a wolf on the ground tomorrow.
And Mike.
Nancy, could you repeat the question, please?
What are 2 to 3 key points you think factions in the public need to consider to better understand the dialogue about wolf recovery?
Some points. You have to be mindful the Endangered Species Act can be very hard to implement. It has, however, been very successful. Larry couldn't be more right that the only fair way to consider the Mexican wolf program in the Blue Range country is to say it's successful. It needs to continue to be so, but it has been successful. Folks need to be mindful, and we spoke to it earlier, but it's a fundamental issue. Historical range is not a guiding principle of the Endangered Species Act. And when you look at climate change, it's quite likely that historical conditions will have increasingly little bearing on the future because everything is shifting. So historical range is useful, but by no means is it a guiding principle. It's important to recognize that the law is clear. Recovery is not simply the prevention of extinction. That's easy. Recovery is recovery. It has a viability component. The species in question needs to be represented by viable populations, typically viable populations, not just one. And it has a geographic component. You know, when you read the law, what it says in the findings, and the findings are important because it sets legislative intent. It says these species have aesthetic value, they have educational value, they have scientific value, they have ecological value. The only way ecological value can be realized if the species in question is widely distributed. Recovery is not synonymous with prevention of extinction. And that's quite often what everybody concludes. We've even got senior administrators for the United States Fish and Wildlife Service making that very simplistic, erroneous claim. Recovery is a great deal more than simply preventing extinction. And if that's too much for the American people, they need to change the law. There's certainly ways to change the law, but until the law's changed, we have to follow the law.